corn.
Oh,
yes,
my goodness.
Man, I mean, that's the title of his book, and they found evidence of bones that were definitely not ripped apart by coyotes or anything like that. They seemed like they were processed bones to be eaten. And
oh my goodness.
There's what's called pot polish on the ends of the bones. That means that the ends of the bones were smoothed by stewing them in pots. Okay. So there is a lot of evidence of some, I wouldn't say, like I said, there's not a lot of cannibalism, but there is some definite clues. In the area north of Chaco, a place called Cowboy Wash, they found human coprolites, which is basically fossilized feces with human myoglobin in them. And this, this protein only occurs when in the human muscle or heart tissue.
That makes me think of all kinds of questions.
I believe that there was cannibalism there, and you find that the population in Chaco Canyon, especially Pueblo Bonito, was larger than the normal population in the Southwest. It tends to be some of the tallest, so perhaps they were getting more protein than the other inhabitants outside Chaco Canyon.
Oh my goodness! So that's not the other red meat or the other white meat. It's something in between, I suppose, huh?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's my understanding that and Christy Turner also believes that a group from Mexico migrated north and kind of terrorized the Southwest for a while. This was a foreign group that came and clearly, you look at Chaco Canyon, and it's unlike any other Pueblo village or Pueblo structure in the area. It's larger than, and it has a certain architecture that the other sites don't tend to have. All the rest are generally smaller. The Pueblos are smaller and less grandiose, but this seems like it was built by a bunch of people who were kind of outgoing, to say the least. I mean, they were radical people that eventually, started to indulge in cannibalism because the evidence is there. The iron deficiency anemia is lower for Chaco Canyon than the other parts of the Southwest. So they were getting more iron. And clearly there wasn't any buffalo in the area. There were small game, but very small game. The deer and elk tend to stay in the mountainous areas, not in Chaco Canyon.
That's a very sobering thought. Let me just take an opportunity here, Gary, to tell everyone again, remind them that they're listening to InceptionRadioNetwork.com, and this is the Epic Voyages show, and we are just spellbound with the fireside stories that Gary David is telling us about what life used to be like in Chaco Canyon, which is one of my favorite places on earth, but it's sounding a little bit scarier to me now, especially since I'm a vegetarian. I guess I wouldn't have lasted very long. Let me ask you something else. We're going to take a break in about 10 minutes here, Gary, but not that I don't enjoy talking about cannibalism, but I kind of wanted to get back to the stars in the Orion constellation and some of the Hopi prophecy and the fact that aren't some of their dwellings on the three mesas, don't they exactly coordinate to the belt of Orion?
Yeah, good point. To get back to the Hopi, because really, this idea of cannibalism is what the Hopi call ka-Hopi or non-Hopi. It's just the Hopi are the people of peace, and they totally disavow any kind of cannibalism in their past. So, it's my understanding that this group came from somewhere else, probably Mexico, and migrated. But
I'm sorry, Gary, let me ask, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but you just made me think of something. Is any of this cannibalism also associated with what they call the bruja or the brujos? Not the shamans, but the witches in that culture?
Well, the Hopi think that, Chaco Canyon was an area of sorcery, a lot of sorcery going on. And the Navajo or the Dene think the same thing. It's a lot of gambling going on there because there was a mythical figure called the Gambler that supposedly took over and enslaved people and had them build these huge buildings. They'd gamble for certain things, and the gambler would win, of course, and then the people would gamble away everything they had, and finally they were enslaved to this one powerful figure.
Interesting. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want you to get back to the belt of Orion and tell us about the mesas. Do they line up with Orion's belt or not, geographically?
Well, maybe I should go back and describe how I came across this realization.
Okay.
Like I said before, I was going to the Kachina dances on the Hopi Mesas, and I was driving up there along I-40, and then I was looking up to the north, and there are three primary mesas that the Hopi have settled on, and they started building these villages about 1100 A.D. And the mesas are large mesas. They're about 7 miles apart, and they're in a line going from east to west. And they're first, second, and third mesa, they're called. And I had just read a book by Robert Bauval called The Orion Mystery. And this book has the theory that the three major pyramids on the Giza Plateau correspond to the belt stars of Orion in approximately about 12,000 years ago. Okay. And, I was just looking up these three Hopi mesas and kind of daydreaming as I drove. And I thought, well, maybe there's an Orion correlation right here in Arizona. So I kind of put that at the back of my mind and went up and watched the Kachina dances. And then I drove home and got out a sky chart and got out a map of Arizona. And I found that there was an inhabited Hopi village or a Hopi ruin site that corresponded to each major star in the constellation Orion. So this completely astonished me because the pattern was so exact. The three Hopi mesas, of course, correspond to the belt stars, Alnilam, Alnitak, and Mintaka, the three major stars that most people can pick them out of the winter sky. There are other sites, like in northern Arizona. There's Navajo National Monument, that cliff dwelling that I mentioned a while back. There are basically two large cliff dwellings. One is called Batatican, and the other is called Keat Seal. And that corresponds to the double star Rigel. It's the left foot of Orion. If you go the opposite direction from the Hopi Mesas, there's a place called Homology. It's due south of the Mesas. It's around Winslow, Arizona. And it corresponds to the star Betelgeuse.
Oh, my.
And,
that's a red star, right?
That's a red giant star. And we could talk about the possibility of it going supernova.
Yeah,
soon,
we're definitely going to do that right after our break in a couple of minutes. But go ahead with the other stars.
The other stars, you have the homology corresponds to Betelgeuse, which is the right shoulder of Orion. The left shoulder of Orion is a village called Wupatki. It was established about the same time as the Hopi Mesas, and it's very close to a volcano. It was an active volcano during that time.
Wow!
That actually erupted, so it probably drew a lot of people from all over the Southwest to watch the fireworks.
Gosh.
So, this is outside of Flagstaff, near the San Francisco Peaks.
What, as I remember, Gary, I'm sorry, go ahead. I can ask this in a minute. Go ahead.
Well, there's one more star in the main constellation. It's the right foot of Orion, and it corresponds to Canyon de Chelly, which is in western Arizona. And it's this beautiful canyon with many cliff dwellings and ruins in it.
And lots of cottonwoods.
Lots of cottonwoods and tamarisk.
It's beautiful.
It's a gorgeous place, and of course the Navajo have built hogans in the bottom. They're octagonal houses that they build. But that corresponds to the star Scythe. That's the right foot of Orion. Now, Orion is reversed from the way you see it in the sky. Basically, the head of Orion is pointed to the southwest. But this is also true for the Giza-Orion correlation. That's also pointed to the southwest. The head is pointing southwest down the Nile River.
Wow, but I didn't realize that.
If you think about it, if you would stand on top of the Great Pyramid, or if you would stand on the first mesa in Arizona in the wintertime and watch the arc of Orion across the sky, it would completely mirror the way Orion looks on the Earth. So you're looking south at the Orion, constellation as it arcs across the sky, and you would be looking south, and the mirror image of the whole Orion correlation would be on the Earth the way it is in the sky. As above, so below.
Oh, that's amazing! That's amazing, and that you've brought us to a really nice spot here to take just a little short break, Gary. I guess it will take about 10 minutes or so. And again, this is just a reminder. You are listening to Epic Voyages, and we are talking with Gary David about the Hopi, the Anasazi. And when we come back, I'm hoping that he'll talk to us some more about supernovas and comets and the star Betelgeuse, which could be a contender for the red star Kachina. And I really urge you to take a look at those 3 books that we mentioned earlier. And this is Inception Radio Network.com. Let's go to break. Welcome back. I hope you had as much fun during the break as we had. We've been talking about Orion and the pyramids in Giza, and I've just been learning more things. You're listening to InceptionRadioNetwork.com, and this is the Epic Voyages show. We are so lucky tonight to have Gary David from originally Cleveland, Ohio, but now Arizona, and he is an expert in the Hopi geographical alignment of mesas and other dwellings and things there on the Hopi Reservation according to the constellation of Orion. He knows a lot about Hopi prophecy. And for this next 30 minutes that we have, we're going to talk more about Betelgeuse, the red star that's in Orion, which is connected with what I have read recently is they suspect that it may have gone supernova, and we just haven't gotten the results of it yet. I'm really eager to talk to Gary about that. And also, Gary, are you with us?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do you have to tell us about Betelgeuse? What do you think about the rumors that it may have gone supernova and we don't know it yet because it's so far away?
Well, Betelgeuse, again, is the right shoulder of Orion, and it's a red supergiant. And the scientists have been looking at this star, and they found that in the last 15 years, it's lost 15% of its diameter. So the star is actually shrinking. It's a veritable star anyway. It's a huge star. It used to the size used to be equivalent to the orbit of either Mars or Jupiter, and it used to vary between the two of those sizes. The orbit, the whole orbit of Jupiter, in our solar system. Mm-hmm. But now its size is equivalent to the orbit of Venus. So it's shrunk down quite a bit in the last 15 years.
From the orbit of Jupiter to the orbit of Venus, it was on that scale?
That scale. It's
That's amazing.
Yeah. And, it's 430 light years from us. So if you step out tonight, if you're if you're not in a city and if you have a clear view, you can see Orion fairly early in the evening because it's going to disappear in a little while and won't be seen for a couple months. But if you go out tonight, you'll be able to see Orion, and the light that you see tonight will have left Orion in 1582 A.D.
Wow.
So,
Say that again. Say that again.
The light that you see tonight, when you step out to see Orion, will have left Betelgeuse in 1582 A.D.
Oh, well, I don't feel so old now.
And that just happens to be the date that Pope Gregory changed the calendar from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar.
Ah.
And a lot of people in the alternative community think that one of the reasons why we're encountering all this chaos is the type of calendar that we're using. Mm-hmm. We're not in sync with the celestial cycles anymore. Mm-hmm. This idea came about through the late Jose Arguelles, who was a Mayan scholar.
Yeah, you're reminding me of a movie. I think it was from maybe the 60s or 70s that was based on a Hopi word called Koyaanisqatsi or something, which means life out of balance.
Life out of balance. That's exactly right. And
that's what you're talking about.
Many of the Hopi elders think that we're at the end of the fourth world.
Yeah.
And, perhaps, like you say, the star Betelgeuse could have gone supernova, mm-hmm. and it might hit us in 2012 sometime.
Well, we won't say what
already, the Hopi have been known as the masters of space, whereas the Maya are known as the masters of time. They nailed down that date, the Maya nailed down the date specifically.
Yeah.
December 21st, 2012, and everybody's waiting for it. But when you ask a Hopi, when will the fourth world end? And he or she will probably say, well, soon, very soon.
Wow.
Maybe in our lifetime.
I'm getting questions here on the chat room, and I can't wait to read them to you. But before I do that, I forgot when we came back from the break, I need to give you the dial-in number for InceptionRadioNetwork.com so that if you want to call in and talk to Gary personally, you could dial 888-919-2355. Okay? Gary, here's a question for you from the chat room. This fellow's been very patient. Richard wants to know, are there any Anasazi sites around the three mesas that are not included in the Orion connection, the map, the geographical map? And if there are, why were they excluded?
Well, basically, there are a lot of different villages built on these three primary mesas, okay? Mm-hmm. And some of them are extinct. They've gone extinct. And, for instance, there was an original village at the base of Second Mesa. It was called Mesipa, and they abandoned that village, and then they moved up to the top of the mesa, and the main village there is Shangopovi. It's one of the largest villages, and it's called the Mother Village. So there are a lot of small pueblos that have been abandoned through the ages. But I think that the Hopi try to honor the constellation Orion by building various structures on these three mesas to represent, the belt stars.
And let me ask you this: why would the Hopi, say a couple of thousand years ago, why would they build these dwellings to match the Orion constellation? I mean, was it part of a oral tradition? Did a shaman get some sort of a message from out there? Was it extraterrestrials? Why did they do this?
Well, for one thing, Orion synchronizes the winter solstice ceremony, which takes place in a kiva, which is an underground prayer chamber. Mm-hmm. It's a communal prayer chamber that they descend through a ladder with the down into this chamber. Sometimes they're round. At Hopi, they're rectangular. These kivas, but they descend through the ceiling of the kiva and with a ladder. But the winter solstice ceremony begins when they see Orion through the overhead hatchway. Hmm. So it kind of synchronizes the whole ceremony. Hmm. It's also my belief that a figure named Masao, mm-hmm. which is a very complex Hopi god. He's the Hopi god of the underworld, of death, of fire, and he's the god of this earth plane. And when the Hopi crawled up out of the Grand Canyon and started to migrate around Arizona, they met with this god Masao. And the god Masao taught them how to grow corn. So, he was very influential in the whole culture. Mm-hmm. Now, Masao is physically, he's a very distinct-looking being. He's very tall. He's got long forearms and long feet. He's got, his limbs are spindly and thin. He's got round eyes and a large round mouth. And his head is huge. It's kind of it's bald, and it's a huge head that kind of the front ridge has a large brow. So this god really looks like, and some artists have drawn sketches of this god that, from oral tradition, from descriptions of this god. This god actually looks like what we consider an extraterrestrial gray. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's the only nocturnal god in the Hopi pantheon. He's a very spooky god. He's a god of death and the underworld. And in fact, the word mas, M-A-S, the root word of Masao, literally means gray. So he had gray skin. Wow.
That's very interesting.
They make Kachina dolls now with the Masao Kachina dolls, and, these very large eyes and large mouth. He actually looks like an extraterrestrial gray.
Do you think that it's somehow connected to a way back in history extraterrestrial visitation?
Well, this is a kind of a touchy area that a lot of people don't agree with. Some people do, of course. Eric von Däniken and so forth believe that ancient aliens came down to the earth. But in the context of Hopi culture, it's very believable that star beings came down to the earth. They have what's called flying shields, or paratuvota, they call them. Mm-hmm. These shields that Kachinas or Masao sometimes pilot, and they came down to Earth. There's another god called Sotuknang. He's the sky god. And if you look at drawings of the sky god, he looks like he's wearing a space helmet.
Oh my goodness!
There's no other way to describe it. It's kind of cylindrical, and he's got these slit eyes, and he's thought to come down on these flying shields. And there are traditions of these beings coming down in these flying shields and mating with Hopi women. So it's very much like, the biblical story of the Watchers coming down from the heavens
and the
mating,
Nephilim. Mm-hmm.
the Nephilim coming down and mating with the daughters of men. It's a very similar scenario.
Interesting. Well, you keep making these, and it's your fault. You're making all these questions pop into my head with these things you're saying. We were talking about Betelgeuse and Katinas, and now we're talking about, is it Masau? Is that how you say it?
Masau, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we were talking about the Mayan calendar, them being the lords of time. Do the Hopi have some kind of a prediction of the end of you said that there's not a particular date, but do they have a prediction along the lines of the Mayan long count, although it may not point to a certain date? Do they think it's going to be soon? Do they have any idea what's going to happen to cause it?
Yeah, the Hopi have what's called a legacy of prophecy. Mm-hmm. Their elders, their spiritual elders, have always come forth with various prophecies, and these started to come to light to the world at large in the mid-20th century. The Hopi had a prophecy of a gourd of ashes that will fall on the earth, causing the destruction of the world. Okay, mm-hmm. And when the elders saw this happening at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they thought, well, our prophecies are coming true. We better share these prophecies with the rest of the world. And there are a number of prophecies according to the spiritual elder, but there a lot of them overlap. For instance, other prophecies, and these are very old prophecies that have been told for hundreds